When I was 21, I accepted a job as an au pair for a wealthy British family living in a countryside estate outside of London. They had 2 children, Sophie, aged 5, and Oliver, aged 3, both sweet and quiet, and the position seemed perfect. The pay was generous, the setting peaceful, and the family's home looked like something out of a storybook. A grand ivy-covered house surrounded by thick woods and rolling fields. I had just finished university and wanted a change, something calm, simple, and away from city noise. I had no idea that house would leave me with nightmares that still wake me in the middle of the night. Mark and Helena, the parents, were polite but emotionally distant. They both worked long hours in the city and were gone most of the week, leaving me alone with the children from morning until bedtime. My days were quiet. Breakfast, walks in the garden, bedtime stories. But my nights quickly became something else entirely. From the very first week, Sophie began refusing to sleep in her room. Every night when I tucked her in, she'd whisper, "She's at the window again." At first, I thought she was having bad dreams or was afraid of the dark. I smiled, closed the curtains tightly, and promised there was nothing there. But Sophie would shake her head, eyes wide, and whisper, "You have to tell her to go away." When I asked who she meant, Sophie said softly, "The lady with the hair in her face." I assumed it was just a childish imagination, maybe something she saw in a movie or storybook, and brushed it off. But as the days went on, her fear didn't fade. Every night at around 1 in the morning, she would wake up crying, staring at the same window, trembling. On the 5th night, I was woken by a sound that made my blood run cold, tapping, light but rhythmic, coming from down the hallway. At first, I thought it was a tree branch against the glass, but it was too deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. I slipped out of bed and walked toward the nursery, heart hammering. The sound stopped when I reached Sophie's door. She was sitting up in bed, clutching her blanket, staring at the window with tears streaming down her face. I whispered her name and turned on the light. The curtains were moving slightly, though the windows were closed. I pulled them back and looked outside. Nothing but the dark garden, the faint shape of the woods beyond, and the reflection of my own frightened face in the glass. I closed the curtains again, hugged her until she fell asleep, and told myself it was all in my head. The next morning, I mentioned the tapping and Sophie's behavior to Helena over breakfast. Her expression changed instantly. Her polite, detached demeanor dropped, and for a moment she looked scared. Then she quickly said, "Please don't talk to Sophie about that. It just encourages her." I started to apologize, but before I could finish, she said quietly, "Her brother used to say the same thing." That night, while giving the children their baths, Oliver suddenly pointed at the window and said, "She's watching again." I froze. He had never said a word about it before. When I asked what he meant, he whispered, "The lady who smiles when you can't see her." I tried to laugh it off, but my stomach twisted. At midnight, the house was silent. The only sound was the clock ticking in the hallway. I was about to turn off my lamp when I heard it again. That same tapping, only this time it was louder, faster. It moved from one end of the hallway to the other, like someone was dragging their nails along the window panes. Then came a sound I will never forget, a low melodic humming, like a lullaby being sung from outside. The voice was faint, but soft, almost soothing, and terribly wrong. I crept down the hallway toward the nursery, the humming growing clearer. When I opened the door, both windows were wide open. Cold night air poured in, the curtains billowing like ghostly arms. Sophie stood by her bed, eyes wide, whispering. She came in. I grabbed both kids and ran to my room, locking the door behind me. I sat there all night, clutching them tightly as the humming faded into silence. At dawn, when the sun finally rose, I went back to check the nursery. The windows were still open. The floor beneath them was wet with dew and streaked with muddy footprints, small bare prints that didn't belong to either child. On the outside of the windows, the glass was smeared with handprints, large ones, as if someone had been pressing their palms against it, trying to get in. I called Mark and Helena immediately. They rushed home that morning and called the police. The officers searched the garden and the woods. They found bare footprints in the mud outside the house, leading from the trees to the nursery windows, but none leading back. Whoever it was had either vanished or never left. The police told us it could have been a vagrant or someone mentally ill, but there were no reports of anyone missing nearby. The local villagers whispered that the woods behind the property were haunted. Decades ago, a woman had gone missing there, a governess who worked for a family in that same house before it was rebuilt. They found her belongings by the trees, but never her body. A week later, I decided to leave. On my last morning, Sophie handed me one of her drawings. A picture of the house, the children in their beds, and a tall woman with long dark hair standing outside the nursery window, her face hidden behind the glass. When I asked her who it was, she said, "You know, the lady who sings to this day. I still dream about that house. Sometimes I wake up to what sounds like tapping at my window, and for a second, I'm back there. The cold air, the humming, the feeling that something was standing just beyond the glass. And I know, deep down, that whatever it was in those woods, it was never just a dream."